We're excited to have the Orton Foundation representatives here with us today to talk a little bit about and provide us with an introduction about Heart and Soul and the program that they are implementing throughout several communities in the state and the Commonwealth. As most of you are aware of and have been involved in the Downtown Revitalization Plan, the Vision 2025, comprehensive plans that have been going on in our communities as well. This is an opportunity for us to provide some opportunities for additional community engagement and encourage people to become involved in their community. And it's an opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about the Heart and Soul, see how it may help us as we decide and move forward with community development in our area. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica Hartness and Doug Jackson with Department of Housing and Community Development, and they're going to make some additional introductions. So thank you, Jessica and Doug.
Hi everyone, so thank you so much for being here. I know that I know a couple of you guys from some of the work that we've done, but for those of you who may not be familiar, Doug and I work for the Department of Housing and Community Development, and we've done a couple grant programs in this area, most recently the Community Business Launch, which you guys probably know as the Gauntlet, and then some industrial revitalization work hopefully in the future. But you know, we're thrilled to be here because we believe that a critical piece of the work that we do is really involving the community and making sure that the goals that you're working towards meet with the ultimate projects that you choose and prioritize. So we actually met Joan and Caitlyn a couple years ago at one of our Virginia Main Street conferences. I don't know if we're supposed to call it a conference, but that's kind of what it is. And we're just excited about the work that they've done at different communities across the United States. And we're excited to have you guys here to talk about Heart and Soul.
And I'm Doug Jackson, and I'm just down the hill in Roanoke. And I've been at DHCD for about 12 years now, and this is a big part of what we do, but we haven't done it quite this way before. So we're learning alongside you if you're interested in doing this, and I've been really impressed with what I've seen so far, and I'm happy to have the Orton Foundation as partners with the Department of Housing and Community Development. And with that, we'll just turn it over to Joan and Caitlyn.
Okay, well, I think I'm starting off here because I'm in front of the room. So again, I'm Joan Wagner of the Orton Family Foundation. I'm based in our Shelburne, Vermont office, which is considered our headquarters, and Caitlyn is in Maine, and we also have some colleagues in Colorado. So as Doug was talking about, this is a program that's nationwide, looking at any city or small town that's interested in getting involved. So so we do have a little den here to do some introductions, because it's always good to kind of know who's in the room. And I'm hoping we'll be a little interactive and conversational today as well, because I think that's what is kind of the heart of what we're about, is about conversation and dialogue and people sharing. And you've committed 2 hours of your time on a Monday evening to be here, so we want to make this as engaging as possible. But we also have kind of built in 2 opportunities for some Q&A. So after I do kind of like the formal nuts and bolts of here's what the community's Heart and Soul model is about, we want to stop and kind of engage some questions and have some discussion. But then we also wanted to maybe give a taste of the Heart and Soul model, like what that kind of means, it looks like, and do a few little short activities, and then have another question and answers and talk about some next steps. Again, as Doug said, if you are interested in following this. So the Community Heart and Soul model is a community development model created by the Orton Family Foundation. I'll talk about that a little more in detail. But one thing I want to say is kind of at the center of that, or a core belief, is that every town is unique. It is special in some way, and I don't want you to be looking at this and thinking that I somehow chose one over another. There are other photographs in here too from the communities of Alleghany County, and that's really we're presenting to Alleghany County, but kind of thinking about what are the places, the events, the feel of what is Alleghany County. What does that mean to you individually? And so I wanted to, since that is such an important part of this model, is kind of starting at the beginning of what is it that really draws you and keeps you to the place that you live in. And that's how I wanted to actually do our introductions. It's just hoping we could go around the room. If you could just say who you are, maybe how you're connected to the community, maybe your role in the community, and one thing that you love about your community. One thing you love about your community. Again, it could be an event, it could be a feel, it could be a place, it could be, there's many things. But it doesn't have to be a long story. In fact, I'm specifically looking for just 1 or 2 words. And we'll have some time later, I hope, to delve in a little deeper to that. All right? So, where am I going to start? Actually, can we start with you, Teresa?
Okay. Teresa Hammond, Alleghany Highlands Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. I think the very giving community, people that are in the people that are so giving in our community.
Thank you.
I'm Joan Van Orsdal. I moved back here after I retired. And I would say that what drew me back was the high percentage of creativity here.
Thank you.
I'm Don McClinton, and connected to the Chamber of Commerce, the Clinton Foundation, and the community of Wrightsville. And I guess the one thing is the spiritual and historical connection to the area.
Okay, historical spiritual. Thank you.
I'm Josh Taylor with the Alleghany Highlands Chamber of Commerce and Tourism as well. And I would say I love all of the outdoor recreational opportunities that our region has.
I'm Darlene Bertram. I serve as the town manager for the town of Clifton Forge. And for me, the glue that holds this area together is volunteerism. Strong sense of volunteerism, willingness to give untold hours to the various opportunities and the promise that the community holds.
Thank you.
My name is Greg Madsen. I work for a healthcare system called Carillion Clinic, and I also serve as chair of the board of the Economic Development Corporation, so with Terry and Marla and that group. What I love about this area, I grew up in Los Angeles, very big city, and coming here, the sense of community that you really can't have in such a large, fairly transient geography. So you come here, you can go down the boulevard and know most everybody, walk into a store, go to Kroger. There's a social time there, and I like that. So,
Did you see the smile on his face when he started talking about that? So you couldn't keep yourself to 1 or 2 words. That was great. Thank you very much.
Terry McClellan with the Alleghany Highlands Economic Development Corporation, and it's home, and my family's here, and its scenic beauty is one of the things.
I'm Tom Seibold, I'm the mayor of City College, and she stole mine.
It's payback.
I spoke before her at a ribbon cutting the other day, and I said what you would say, so we're even there. But it is, it's home. You know, I know most everybody I run into on the street, we stop and we talk. I'm not interested in being anywhere.
Thank you.
I'm Debbie Seibold, and this is home to me also. Yeah, and I love the nature, the beauty, the outdoors, and the sense of smallness. It's a safe place. It's a safe feel to it.
I'm Marie Fitzpatrick with the Alleghany Foundation, and I like the small town atmosphere, and it's a nice place to raise your family. But there's also, I believe, an opportunity for growth so that we can expand our community.
John Lanford, County Administrator for Alleghany. Not originally from here, I'm from Chesterfield County. It's just outside the city of Richmond, Central Virginia. My wife is originally from here, but much like Tom and Terry, it's home to me now. And the people here are what make it the community that it is. Just fabulous people.
Great.
I'm Susan Lovelady. I'm a newcomer to Alleghany County. My husband works at Bath Community Hospital, and so we came here specifically for out of respect for the outdoor environment and how gorgeous it is here. It's archetypically gorgeous. It's very beguiling, and so we came here for just the beauty of the outdoors. We enjoy doing outdoor activities, and we felt like this would be a place we could comfortably call home.
Dr. Paul Lincoln Hooker, I born and raised, grew up here, lived here all my life. With the Alleghany Historical Society and Old Town Covington. I work for Teresa Hammond, so she doesn't pay me, but I work for her. And
what does she tell you that you love about your community?
she told me to say the hidden historic treasures that we have here. Little known, but the bridge behind you is one of a kind. Only one in this country, maybe in the world. So.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like that opening phrase that the town is your home and it's unique and it's special. That's what I was hearing coming out of some of these things. And you see how folks had a hard time keeping to just one or two words. I think we had someone in the room, we were just introducing ourselves, saying how we're connected to the community, one thing you love about your community.
My name is Mary Donnan, and connected through work with the Alleghany Foundation. We hear lots of the things people are doing that are really exciting through our funding networks and other convenings. And place. One word.
Nice, thank you. Yeah. So one thing I would just pick up on, we had an opportunity before we got to the college today to drive through both Clifton Forge and Covington. And I have to agree, it's beguiling. It's gorgeous. And I come from a really beautiful state. I come from Vermont, and I love my state, my small town. But it's just the lushness here, the beauty is just really captured my attention. So thank you for sharing. So I think that kind of brings us to this slide, which is just one way of kind of collecting those kind of nuggets from the community about what they love and putting that down. In this particular slide, this was in a community where they were in Galesburg, Illinois, asking people to say, list all the free stuff that you can do in Galesburg, kind of reminding people of how many things are just out there and available for people to take advantage of and do. So one of the ways we think about the model is that it is a catalyst for positive change. And belief is that by bringing people together to talk about what they love about their community, as well as their hopes and concerns and their values, but starting from that heart of what is it that you love, what is the soul of your community that's worth holding on to, that is a way that brings people together in conversation so that they can talk about maybe some of the harder stuff, the more challenging stuff that their communities might be facing. I think Heart and Soul continually asks, is community engagement and involvement in our community all that it could be? And as I'm kind of going through this today, if you can kind of keep asking yourself that, is community engagement and involvement all that it could be in your community? My guess is that everyone who's here in this room right now is very engaged, and is very invested in the community. And what about opposite thousands of other people who are part of this community too? Where is it all that it can be in terms of hearing from your residents? So the Heart and Soul model is a resident-driven model, so trying to reach as many people as possible to find out about what they love, not just a small segment, and using that to inform the decisions that are made by your community in really important and long-lasting ways. So I hope one thing that we'll bring today is talking about or pointing to a number of examples of towns that have embraced their heart and soul and how they've used it, but keeping on that theme that each town is unique, each town has its own context, they have their own things that they love, but they also have their own issues, concerns, motivations for doing heart and soul, and I hope that certain things will resonate with you, but again, your community is your own, and you kind of know it best about kind of the things that you're facing and the things that you would like to really raise up. But one example I'd like to start with, because it's nice to have examples that you can keep referring back to that exemplify what heart and soul can do, that catalyst for positive change, is there's a town in Biddeford, Maine. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Biddeford, Maine. But you can tell probably a little bit by the architecture that it was a mill town, like many small towns across the United States. In New England, mill town, that in the first half of the 19th century was kind of the economic driver of that town, and really, population increase. And towards the latter half of the century saw its mills slowly closing over time, to the point that there was an extreme amount of vacancies. Property values had gone down, population had declined, and by the 80s, we're kind of looking for, well, what's the next big thing that we might do? What can we bring in? What is that kind of, maybe we'll say, silver bullet? What can we bring in that will become the next economic driver? And at that time, the best option seemed to be to bring in an incinerator right into the downtown, which was a waste-to-energy facility that they were going to build downtown. It provided about 80 good, high-paying jobs. It increased the tax base. It, brought that center, but it wasn't long that it was there that other repercussions seemed to come out of that. It was incredibly smelly. That it got to the point that it earned the town the name of Trash Town. Or even Stink Town. So you can be thinking about how that, one, affects like the personal identity of the people who are living there, but also, if you're a real estate developer, how do you sell? Come build in Trash Town, come build in Stink Town. But it was pretty pervasive. Other towns had hoisted this identity on them, and it was not necessarily something that residents wanted to have, but it was there. And so you had this tension between, yes, there's some good paying jobs, but it's also kind of depressing a lot of our economic possibility, and kind of thinking about that. So that is a picture of the incinerator, later stages of its development. Essentially, it was there for a while, and then I think the town, city council, others were, mayor was interested. Like, I think we need to look at ways of getting rid of this, right? And so it was put on the ballot to buy up the incinerator so that they could tear it down and start anew, if you will. But when the first time it was on the ballot, it did not get passed. I think people were not really engaged enough in the conversation to understand why and how it was maybe getting in the way of other things happening in the town. That was around the time that they started the Heart and Soul process, which brought people together and had them talking about what it is they really cared about, their town, what they liked about the downtown, and the fact that they wanted to rid themselves of this new identity that they had that they did not want. It's not what they wanted to be known for. Through the process, ended up passing as a town for the town to buy the facility and tear it down. And it did end up turning out to be make a huge difference in that town in terms of once now there was more interest in the town. Those who were looking at it could see too that the people were now more invested and proud of their town, and that it was gaining a lot more interest from investors. They were able to secure grants. And kind of, I guess the long story short, a number of years later, they had now $100 million of investment in that community, 500 new jobs, 100 new businesses, and space that all this textile mill space that they had, 1.6 million square feet. Around the time of the incinerator, they had only 400,000 of that was occupied. The rest was not. Now it's the reverse. Less than 400,000 is unoccupied, and the rest is occupied with all of those businesses and investment. So the other thing interesting to know about this, and Caitlyn, you can talk about this more because this is Maine, but Maine is considered one of the oldest states, right? In terms of age of population, but Biddeford is known as the youngest state in Maine with a median age of 35. So for them, it was also another way, one of the things we often talk about in towns that might be dying is it's about the schools, that there's no jobs and the young people are leaving. So this is something that was truly transformative for Biddeford. So you can kind of see it in the numbers. So residential values went up, commercial values went up, all of that stuff that came along. But it certainly was not just about money and economic development. It was truly about the shift in identity that they went from trash town to leading the way for other towns in Maine to kind of be looking at that. So where did the concept for Heart and Soul come from? Has anyone heard of the Vermont Community Store, Vermont Country Store? Or some people have one hand. What is the Vermont Country Store? How do you know it? Like, what's yours? So
Oh,
what do you
they
think
sell
about?
Tigress perfume still.
Yeah.
Which is,
The only place you can buy it illegally.
And some people are probably like, what is that, right?
Just from traveling, I've been there, get maple syrup and.
So the Vermont Country Store is in a small town called Weston, Vermont. It's 3 generations now who have owned it, and their taglines, they're the purveyors of the hard to find and kind of the nostalgic. So that's why we talk about things that you can't find anywhere else. So they have both a physical building where they sell them. Actually, we have 2 locations in Vermont. That's the actual store, and then they have a catalog, and that's actually the one I think a lot of people know because it has pretty wide distribution internationally. And the current owner and his 3 sons run the business, and the current owner, Lyman Orton, was obviously this is a big business in the little town of Weston, and he was asked to be on the planning commission of his town. And what he was discovering by being on the planning commission in conversation is that there were a lot of decisions being made about land use in small Weston being made by a very small number of people. And that greatly concerned him because he said these kind of decisions are going to affect our future in this town and what it looks like for years and years to come, and this small group is making these decisions. So he was not happy with that model, and this is kind of what prompted him to develop the Heart and Soul model. But the other thing, I have to tell this story, is that one of the land use decisions was in our beautiful little town, Western Vermont, trees and mountains. There was a developer who wanted to come in and site an African animal amusement park. And this was something that some townspeople thought, well, that will be really interesting tourist draw, and it can be an economic, development idea. And others were like, what are you talking about? This is so out of character of what a small town in Vermont, what we want to be. Why would we want this here? So it was a contentious issue that actually did get passed, and the developer was able to come in, started the project, kind of scoured part of the mountain, started the park, opened it, and it closed 6 months later, because people were not interested in coming to see African animals in Vermont. In fact, it had changed from African animals to farm animals, but still was not quite the draw that was hoped. So really the bottom line of that story, again, is the alignment that Lyman Orton says. He says the scars on the mountain healed faster than the scars in the town, because in his point there was not a unified vision of what the town wanted to be, who they said their identity was, so that when they were making big decisions like that, they could draw upon it and be kind of unified, and whether this fit, whether an idea like that would fit the way they wanted their town to be. So I wanted to stop there for a moment and share with you a short video featuring Lyman, so you can see him, and also just talking.
Community Heart and Soul is a field-tested planning method for small cities, towns, and rural communities. Based on 3 powerful principles: involve everyone, focus on what matters. Community Heart and Soul is a field-tested.
Where is it?
Community Heart and Soul is a field-tested planning method for small cities, towns, and rural communities. Based on 3 powerful principles: involve everyone, focus on what matters, and play the long game.
Okay, sorry, we'll start over.
Community Heart and Soul is a field-tested planning method for small cities, towns, and rural communities. Based on 3 powerful principles: involve everyone, focus on what matters, and play the long game. Developed by the Orton Family Foundation, Community Heart and Soul helps towns move toward a brighter, more prosperous future, rooted in what matters most to the people who live there. The seed for Heart and Soul was planted by businessman Lyman Orton, who with his 3 sons is proprietor of the Vermont Country Store. Orton served on his town's planning commission when it was wrestling with divisive development proposals. Orton grew frustrated that decisions being made that would shape the town's future were without guidance from the majority of the residents. There had to be a better way.
We call it community heart and soul, guided by what matters most. What matters most to whom? To the residents, to the way people live their lives.
If our conversations focused on what matters most to our communities, then what conclusions would we come to about our town's economic development and the future of this area? Any community can just stumble into the future. We have a real opportunity here to seek out and grow in a way that reflects the whole community's values and ideas.
Almost any small town would benefit from going through a community heart and soul process because it brings the residents of the community closer together. And as they get closer together, the differences tend to fade away, and the things that they care about the most, the things that matter most, replace the differences. They become more trusted in one another. They become more collaborative in their decision making and in their discussions about their community, and they become stronger believers in their community. So people will continue to live there, new people will move in, and people will invest more in their community.
That's just kind of the history of how we kind of in some ways got to where we are today. And when Lyman first thought about that idea of how do you get residents more involved, that was the path sort of leading to the development of the community heart and soul model, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes. But I wanted to just say that is a result of like 10 years of development and field testing. We have towns that have been through it and kind of helped kind of feed back into what we know and learned about what some of the best practices are. And it's also a result of a $10 million investment on Lyman Orton's part, and as he continues this and looks to spread it. So essentially, Heart and Soul is Lyman Orton's philanthropy, it's the Orton Family Foundation's philanthropy. So all our materials and assistance are to be accessible to towns who would like to embrace this and try it. So this is just the map. It does need a little updating, but there's over 66 towns that either have been through it or are going through the community heart and soul right now. You can see a number on the map here. And so the orange are the certain towns, but then we also have partnerships with within certain states that also help assist towns in doing this. For example, in in Pennsylvania, we have Pennsylvania Communities Council, which is considered a partner and works with a lot of towns to provide some of the funding and support and coaching as well. And here in Virginia, we have the Department of Housing and Community Development in Virginia as a partner. So we hope to add a lot more dots, particularly in Virginia and in that maybe the Alleghany area, if that is something that you decide does sound like you want to move forward with. So again, I'll ask that question: is community engagement, involvement, all that it could be in Alleghany County? And if Heart and Soul proposes a different way of doing community engagement, what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that compare to things you've already done in the past? How does it complement things you're doing right now? How do you bolster that? And there are three main principles to Heart and Soul. And you can see them listed up there, but I want to spend some time kind of thinking about each one of these. This involves everyone, focusing on what matters and playing the long game. So involving everyone is what I like to spend the most time on, because I think that is, if you're answering that question, is community involvement, engagement, all that it could be. That might have to do with numbers as much as it has to do with quality of engagement, right? So this is involve everyone, looks at both of those things. You know, who is in your community? Whose voices have been heard historically in the past, whose have not been heard, and everywhere in between, that kind of spectrum. So really rest on the belief that a more inclusive and diverse public process and outreach will lead to more durable decision making. Now, in reality, when we're talking about like involving everyone, does that mean every single person that hits that population point? we talking about everyone participating all the time? Not necessarily. We're also not talking about the same people or only some people participating all the time, which sometimes can be the same people. Some of the super volunteers that we have in the community who are doing great things and are everywhere and know all the many of the connections in the community and are making huge strides. But beyond those super volunteers, how do you kind of grow that pool of volunteers and get people involved as well? So I think it's more about raising the expectation, the opportunities for everyone to participate at least some of the time, right? That you're hearing people in different places at different times.